Thanks for joining us. We begin our show with Israel's decision to delay the demolition of the Bedouin village Khan al-Ahmar just east of Jerusalem in the West Bank. Israeli authorities set October 1st as the deadline for residents to dismantle their homes. This after the High Court okayed the demolition under the pretext that it had been built without a permit. Palestinians are claiming the international pressure made all the difference, but the Prime Minister promises the village will be evacuated eventually.
Khan al-Ahmar will be evacuated with or without agreement. It will not take weeks, it will be much shorter. We will make several vital preparatory moves in the international arena. We will give a last chance for evacuation by agreement, but in any case, Khan al-Ahmar will be evacuated. I'm not talking about a cosmetic evacuation, but a real evacuation. Neither do I need fictitious ultimatums because we're all united around one goal, to evacuate this illegal construction. There is no argument about this. A fake argument is being created. Khan al-Ahmar will be evacuated, and very soon.
And joining me now in studio are Rabbi Dov Lipman, former member of Israeli Parliament in the Yesh Atid party, and Moshe Feiglin, former member of Israeli Parliament of the Likud party. Thanks for joining us today, and you are also the leader of the new Zehut party. Right. I want to start with, there are reports that the Attorney General, the Israeli Attorney General, requested this delay for legal reasons, and the Israeli broadsheet Haaretz hinted that the move may be related to, quote, unusual diplomatic statements by both the European Union and the Chief Prosecutor of the International Court of Justice in The Hague, who said that raising the village could trigger a war crimes investigation. Has Netanyahu caved in to international pressure?
Yes.
Simple as that.
Simple as that.
What would you say to him for doing that?
That I don't believe him, that he's going to do it in a few weeks from now, as he says. Unfortunately, I do believe the Arabs that call themselves Palestinians, the Bedouin who sit over there, and I agree with them that it's the international pressure that did the whole change. And right. Basically what Netanyahu did, he gave up on the sovereignty of the Knesset, he gave up on the sovereignty of the government and the sovereignty of the Supreme Court out of fear from the international court.
Dov, 30 seconds.
I wonder if there's any U.S. involvement whatsoever. I have a hard time believing that the Prime Minister gave into European pressure. I think his whole game right now is the relationship with President Trump in the United States, and there must have been something behind the scenes there where he said, try to find a way to calm this down. We don't need this headache right now.
Okay, we have to go for a quick break. When we come back, more on this with my guests on this issue, and the peace agreement between Israel and Jordan suffers a major blow. Can it hold up? Stay with us. We're back on the spinner with Dov Lipman and Moshe Feiglin, still talking about the delay in the demolition of Khan al-Ahmar, or as you say, it's probably not going to happen. But while the buildings were built there illegally, as the High Court of Israel said, Palestinians claim they never get building permits to begin with. So is it fair?
This is not true. The Bedouin gets permits. The Israeli government actually puts a lot of money in trying to settle them down in a legal way. That is not the case. That is not the case. They would have leave long time ago, but it became politics, and the European Union got involved. And as I explained before, the Netanyahu government giving up on the basic Israeli sovereignty to do what needs to be done in its territories.
Dov, if indeed the village is raised, can we say that it's the end of the two-state solution? Because at least on the left wing, they say that that would allow Israeli authorities to basically cut the West Bank into two parts, which would not allow the formation of a Palestinian state.
I think we have to ask that question in general. Where are we in terms of heading towards any kind of two-state solution?
But that's a very specific location. I think that's what you were alluding to as well, that it's all about, geopolitics, geography of the area. That's what they're talking about.
Right. I think that the claim that they're making, that they're never given permits, etc., this is, from my perspective, we sat together in Knesset when we tried to make an effort to work out the whole Bedouin situation and to try to make things with permits, do it properly. I think that you can't have it both ways. You can't, on the one hand, say, if Israel does something illegally, that must be dismantled, and the entire world comes together against us on that. But when there's something done on the Palestinian side or on the Arab side, on the non-Jewish side, then somehow they can claim that we're against them. I think you have to say there's sovereignty, there's a Supreme Court, there's a process that we go through. We live in a democratic country. I will respect the Supreme Court's decisions when it might not be in Jewish Israel's favor, but they have to respect it when it's not in their favor.
But these are people, by the way, who can't vote, for example, for an Israeli government. So here is the High Court of Israel that is issuing a decision about them. They don't have the power to influence, do they?
We have to come to a situation where everyone in Israel, and we're able to make, we call it hasdara, to work out all of these details so that everyone has a fair shake. But in the meantime, if they're going to go to the Supreme Court to go against us, we have to use the Supreme Court in the situation against them as well.
All right, let's move on to the peace agreement between Israel and Jordan. Dealt a blow this week after King Abdullah said he plans to end the lease of 2 areas of land to Israel that was agreed on in annexes to the 1994 peace treaty. The areas are Naharaim in the north and Sofar in the south. The king has been under pressure from Jordanian members of parliament and the Jordanian public not to renew the lease. This as tensions between the 2 countries grow, specifically over Jordan's role in managing Muslim holy sites in East Jerusalem. Could this whole thing unravel?
Of course, but I look at the whole situation in a much wider perspective. I think the whole Middle East is going back to the basic frame that held before the Sykes-Picot Agreement after World War I. The whole concept of the modern state do not fit the Arab society, and what happened in Syria and Libya sooner or later is going to happen in Jordan as well. So the whole discussion about this peace agreement with Jordan going to be, it's an agreement on the ice.
Why do you think he's doing it, King Abdullah?
Because of inner pressure. He has inner forces that more extreme and pushing him towards this direction, and it's ridiculous because this guy is getting from Israel, who's drying up every year 50 million cube of water straight from the Kinneret,
the Sea of Galilee,
of the Galilee, when we really need these water. So he's not in a position to argue.
I would also add that regarding all the issues of the holy sites and the Temple Mount, so many decisions are made based on that agreement, whereas most of Israel would like to see changes when it comes to that. I have a hard time believing as well that he would allow the whole thing to collapse and then Israel would be able to assert itself the way Israelis perhaps want them to do, even regarding that issue as well.
But it goes back to what we said before. When you have such a weak leadership, okay, here in Israel, such a weak person like the king of Jordan, in such a weak position, is frightening Israel, who support him not only water but his basic protection. Jordan would not exist without this basic protection of Israel. Okay.
I want to talk a little about the peace process. There are reports, well, the non-existent, shall I say, peace process, but there are reports that the Trump administration is mulling recognizing Jerusalem as the Palestinian capital as well as the Israeli capital in a bid to bring the Palestinian Authority President Mohammed Abbas back to the negotiating table. Could this be a problem for Netanyahu?
This could be a major problem for Netanyahu. And I also wanted to mention, on that issue and all the issues we're talking about, you cannot remove the fact that we're in an election year, whether it's a year from now or sooner, from the equation. Every decision that's
Israeli
being made... Israeli election. Every decision that's being made by Prime Minister Netanyahu is with that framework in mind. And for him to have something like that happen, where somehow now all of a sudden the Palestinians are given this kind of recognition, he will be doing everything possible to make sure that doesn't happen, which is why you will see him make other decisions to try to pacify the United States, to try to make sure that something like that doesn't happen, because that would be a major hit to his base and a major hit to his re-election campaign.
These reports also say, Moshe, that if the Republican Party weakens in the midterm elections in November, the White House might be tempted to kind of ramp up the pressure on Israel to get a deal so it can show in 2020, ahead of the presidential elections, that it has this major diplomatic achievement.
Well, it seems like it's already on the table that the solution that Trump is pushing to is actually dividing Jerusalem. That Jerusalem.
Trump is?
Yes, he's talking about an American embassy.
You're confident of that?
Trump is actually talking about it. He's talking about an American embassy on the eastern side of Jerusalem, and I'm very much afraid that with no opposition, not here in Israel, because the Likud is in power. Netanyahu is the prime minister, not Avi Gabay from Labour Party, okay? So there's not real opposition here in Israel, not real opposition in America.
This is the closest administration that his government has had, and you're saying that it might, in a way, shall I say, betray them later on by dividing Jerusalem?
Let's be honest. What we facing is the attempt of dividing Jerusalem and give the eastern part of it, which is the holiest, the key part of the holy part of it, to the Arabs.
Palestinians don't deserve a capital in East Jerusalem?
And it's a tremendous danger.
Do the Palestinians deserve a capital in East Jerusalem, or not?
Of course not.
No,
of course not.
Do they?
I do not think so either.
You don't think so either?
No,
you agree
I think
on that?
Jerusalem is the capital, undivided capital of the Jewish people eternally, and has to be that way.
And only
so they won't come back to the table.
And only under Netanyahu here, and unfortunately Trump there, because Netanyahu is participating with this process, that, God forbid, might happen.
I feel that I even watched the Prime Minister speak last week in the Knesset. So much of the success in the foreign policy was built on this close relationship with President Trump and the United States. Right. So much of it. And President Trump, the art of the deal, it's all about give and take. There's no way he's going to swing towards one direction and not try to force this to happen. And many of us have seen that for a long time coming, and now everyone's bracing themselves to see what will that be.
All right, I want to move on to the deep divides between left and right in Israel. Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated 23 years ago, but based on the memorial service held for him yesterday, the scars still run very deep. Rabin's granddaughter, Noah Rothman, spoke out against Benjamin Netanyahu at the ceremony as he sat just a few feet away and accused him of deepening polarization in Israeli society.
There should not be a prize given for patriotism or for being close to the ones in power. If you don't stop this voyage of seduction, this problem of partisanship among us, this incitement of everyone and everything that doesn't line up with you, blood will be spilled again, God forbid.
Not long before the anniversary, a day when Israeli society tries to deal with incitement and polarization, a member of Israeli parliament, Oren Chazan, posted a picture on Facebook depicting Chagai Elad, the director of the human rights organization B'Tselem, as a wanted criminal who must be brought to justice, dead or alive. Chazan published a photo after Elad's speech in the United Nations, in which he called upon countries to take actions against Israel. One Israeli lawmaker has complained to police that Chazan is inciting to violence. When you look at Oren Chazan, what he's done there, one has to agree with Noah Rothman, I think, that nothing has been learned after 23 years.
Well, the only thing I understand from it is that Oren Chazan is acting in a disgusting way. But, you know, saying that it was the incitement that led to the murder of Rabin is making your life easy. When you really check how the left leaders are speaking much worse than the right leaders of Israel, I think that the real understanding that we have to...
Why? Are left-wingers calling Benjamin Netanyahu a traitor and putting SS flags on his sleeve? Putting him in kafia? Is that what they're doing?
I remember leftists calling Ariel Sharon a murderer, Menachem Begin a murderer. Netanyahu is accusing to being the murderer of Rabin. Just today I heard it. Yes, and the difference between the left and right is that in the left side of the Israeli map, it's much more intellectual people who's saying that than Oren Chazan, the spiritual leaders and writers and so on.
What's your take on Oren Chazan?
Certainly condemn and criticize what he said. I spoke out against what happened with B'Tselem at the United Nations, and I think that Ambassador Dani Danon...
What do you mean you spoke out about? You spoke about him going to the United Nations?
Going to the United Nations. I don't believe there's any place for Israelis to be going outside of Israel and giving that kind of open criticism, especially United Nations Security Council. I think Ambassador Dani Danon looked at him, called it like it is. He said, you're collaborating with the other side, but Israel's different than the rest of the world. Collaborators here aren't killed, aren't silenced in that way.
So why do you don't you want to silence him? I mean, what's wrong with him going?
No, I feel that I can criticize him. I'm not silencing him. I can say, I feel it's the wrong thing for someone to go. There's a system in the Israeli army to deal with things that are done improperly. We're a democratic civil society, and that's the way it should be done. And it's an anti-Israel agenda to go there and do that. It is collaborating with the Palestinians.
Speaking of silencing, Speaking of sanctions, there's a member of the ruling Likud party, Nava Boker, who was called for the Attorney General to shut down B'Tselem, saying Chagai Elad was acting against the state's democratic nature. So are you against that? Shutting down B'Tselem?
If there are laws in the country that say that a person is not allowed to do certain things and perhaps causing tremendous damage to a state, that can be done. But never calling for someone's murder, never saying wanted dead or alive. That's exactly what we have to move away from. Disagree, but disagree agreeably.
What do you make of this call to shut down an NGO like B'Tselem?
I'm against it. Yeah, I think. Because they have the freedom of speech, and they can say, well, I agree with what Dov said. There's a limit. There's a thin line between saying whatever you want, demonstrate, do whatever you want inside the house, but going to the internet, to the entire world, and ask the world to get involved with what's happening in your country. That is something else.
And what do you make of what Noah Rothman said at the memorial service, that this government specifically deepens polarization?
I do happen to believe that there is a tone which is not appropriate in terms of the divisiveness. I think that people
She was blaming specifically this government, though.
Right, I understand
you
that.
Agree with that?
I do feel that there have been statements made, both by the Prime Minister and others, that cross the line. I think we should disagree with each other strongly, ideological debates, but let's avoid name-calling, let's avoid labeling on both sides. And in this case, if this is the Prime Minister, this is the leadership, they should avoid doing so. We should learn lessons from the past.
So we're entering the election year. Do you think we're going to see more of this polarization and incitement, Moshe? You'll be running?
Unfortunately, what defines the left is I am not right. What defines the right, I am not left. No one is saying nothing. My whole identity, not mine, but in the Israeli politics, is the negativism of the other side. And therefore, yes, we're going to see it.
20 seconds.
And I feel, sadly, that the Prime Minister and other leaders have learned from overseas as well, where they've seen that kind of language somehow riles people up.
The Trump era.
But it creates a divided nation. We should work towards healing that and uniting as a people in Israel.
Okay, that's all the time we have. I'd like to thank my guests, Moshe Feiglin and Dov Lipman. Thank you very much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure.